Welcome to Energy Hack 2026, organized by Solar Austin.
Okay, Martin, you're on.
Okay, cool. So this project that I worked on for the hackathon is called Building Energy Load. It's basically a dashboard to keep track of future energy load based on building permit data. So for the summary and the problem statement, the question is, can we verify Austin Energy's claim for developing more peaker plants to meet growth in peak demands? Currently, it sits at 3 gigawatts, and I think some of their concerns is that with EVs and data centers, that amount could basically double or like triple, and it's just from the data center itself. So the current solution is to look at publicly, or at least the solution that I propose is to look at publicly available building permits and then kind of calculate the power / the demand from these new buildings. So this is currently viewable from a dashboard on Lovable. Financial impact, I put something there but it disappeared, but the financial impact, or I guess the political impact, is that something like this, like sort of like a fact checker tool, will kind of give us ammunition to go against false claims made by organizations, essentially. So in terms of who pays, the API is free. It's from the City of Austin Open Data Platform. Right, it can also be potentially scraped with a free version of Databricks. I think it's not a very heavy compute task. It's just maybe like running a pipeline like once a month or something like that. In terms of the hosting of the dashboard, it's being hosted with Lovable, which is $30 a month, but that's something that Solar Austin is already doing. For stakeholders, energy advocacy groups like Solar Austin will be interested, civic tech groups like Open Austin. This is a plug that I'm also going to do. I'm part of Open Austin, but they're a civic tech group, and they also kind of believe in like open data and kind of like open answers to sort of questions that residents have. In terms of the, okay, I definitely put more things there. So now I'm just like, but there was more stuff there. Okay, the inspiration and motivation. So the motivation is suspicious claims from Austin Energy and concern over the peaker plant voting. Something that also motivated this weekend is just to kind of learn more about like energy, and like I took it in high school and I took it in college, but then I kind of forgot everything. Like, what is the difference between megawatts and megawatts hour? I learned that in the morning. So just kind of learning more about the technical language that people use, so that way they can't kind of trick me into believing what they say. In terms of inspiration, the lovable dashboards that from Austin Clean Energy were really good. I really like the one with the path to 2035 carbon free. That was one dashboard that was inspiring. I also do some of this work in Open Austin. We have like a lot of research questions, so this is like a perfect research question. Like, can we believe the claims of so and so? Okay, so I don't know why so those were my inspiration and motivation. In terms of a final product, this is currently what it looks like. So it's hosted on Lovable, and this is the building energy usage in megawatt hour per year. As you can see, most of it is from the red, which is multifamily. So in 2022, there was like a huge spike because everybody was moving here, and I think developers were like, yeah, let's build. So this is kind of like how much load building these buildings would acquire. But you can kind of see slowly it's been decreasing, and 2026 is really low, but that's because we're only in July, and it's probably only looking at half of the data for the year. A lot of these other variables don't seem to make like a huge impact. So one thing that I'm kind of suspicious about is sort of like, were there any permits for data centers that I missed? Because I feel like that would basically just like dwarf all these other categories. I also converted the megawatt hour into megawatts because I think that's sort of the main concern. It's not really like how much energy we need throughout the year, but how much energy we need during like the really like peak of the peak hours. So it just kind of did like a mathematical formula to convert the megawatt hours into megawatts. So this is more stuff about the estimated load by property type. Right now it's dominated by multifamily, which is, I think in this one it's like 5 buildings or more, so you can just assume it's like apartments or like condos that will be lumped into multifamily. And how is this calculated? So there was an ECAD data for commercial buildings, so things like hospitals, apartments was included, parking lots, stuff like that, offices. So they basically return like the kilowatt hour per square foot that the building used. So I basically referenced that data into this one to have this very complicated formula of just kilowatt hours per square foot times the total new additional square foot. Okay, yeah, another thing, this is all new buildings, so I didn't consider any like demolitions, I didn't consider renovations or like replacements, that kind of stuff. Those weren't included in this. So yeah, and then for anything that I couldn't find from the ECAT data, the parameters or like the variables were like literature based, so just kind of from various sources online. EIA was one of them. Just kind of figuring out like, okay, what number can I use for that calculated EUI kilowatt hour per square foot. So like a next step that I could do is potentially have some of these variables be like the user can just input them, because I assume if you have a different assumption about something, that could really change your load composition and also your load amount. So that's like another thing that could be done. And I think that's it, yeah. I guess, and then the last next step is kind of fitting in the EV data and trying to find if there was missing permits for data centers, because if they were here, they should basically overtake every single field in this graph. Kind of like how multifamily is doing it right now. But yeah, I think that's the project.
Thank you so much. Questions? Yay.
Question about EVs, because it's not the EVs that would show up here, it's the chargers.
Yeah, it's the charging, yeah.
Okay, and were you able to find permits for chargers within the database?
I can do an EV presentation later if we have time. I did a bunch of work on the EV stuff.
That
It wasn't about chargers though, it was about registrations that we could track through the state registrations, number of EVs that were registered that are in these zip codes, basically. So we can know the loads created by those EVs.
Yeah, but
they have parking lots, but I don't know what's like the percentage of charging per that parking lot. So if I knew like, oh, in a parking lot of like 1,000 square feet, there's like 2 chargers, then I could kind of like based off of that, I could kind of calculate something. But I didn't include that in this one because I forgot that, yeah, you have EV charging in parking lots. But yeah, that is like one way that data could be.
yeah, because one of the things about multifamily is some new multifamily locations are putting in EV chargers,
Yeah.
but I have not seen, and I could be wrong, any regulatory permitting kind of thing that says you've got to have X amount of charge capability per so many parking lots in multifamily. So I'm not sure the EV registrations correlate to the chargers. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the issues that is going to be much more important in the next couple of years.
So can I say 2 things here? California did regulate new solar on all new buildings, so the idea of regulating new chargers on all new construction is feasible, right? If there's a concept in building code that could mention that, and I'm saying, Katie, I'd like you to bring that up at City Council, because I have an EV and finding a place to charge it until I had charging at my multifamily apartment was very difficult. But now that I have it, it's super easy, and I think everybody who lives in North Austin lives in my apartment complex because we have an EV charger. I mean, and what we're trying to do though, Michael, and I'm trying to understand your question, what we're trying to do is just like estimate the total load for an EV in a given year within the load zone, right? So I'm not sure how that, obviously the number of charges has something to do with it, but the load calculation would be just like the number of cars times the number of miles times the number of watt hours per mile to get an estimate. But maybe something else to do if we want to, try to create an equitable environment where people who live further away can also have electric cars in an easy way, is to do some kind of like code, like you're saying. Does that How does that relate to what you're saying?
A lot more detail than I am. How about
Okay. Yeah. Well, what were you thinking about when you said like the number of chargers? How could we fit that into this algorithm?
Because I haven't seen anything that's requiring it yet. I'm not saying it won't be there
Got
in the
it.
future.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting issue as you know, we move forward, especially because Austin's built in the last few years a whole ton of multifamily. And I have no idea if they required any EV chargers, probably not, because I haven't heard of it. And I'm just curious as to how we're going to fix that.
So, Katie, a question for you. Because Katie's worked in city planning and specifically in transportation, there has been a dialogue at some point somewhere in the country where I've heard like, for X number of square feet, you need X number of parking spots, right? Which fundamentally gives you the environment that we have. But the opposite could also be true. Instead of 10 parking spots for 10 square feet, we could say 5 parking spots for 10 square feet to encourage carpooling and bikes and walking and transit and stuff like that. So I don't know, is Austin thinking from a code level about transportation in that way at all? Do you know?
Yeah, they just got rid of the minimum parking requirements. It was like a multi-decade fight to get rid of the minimum parking requirements, and now there's discussion, discussion to add maximum parking requirements, because even if you get rid of the minimum, a developer and bank typically are pushed to provide a minimum amount of parking anyway. So putting a cap on it is another policy step to take to limit that.
We just got rid of the minimum parking requirements and it took decades because who wanted it? The pavers?
I mean, just from my experience being a civil engineer, banks have a big part to play. Like for financing, they want to make sure that you're providing enough parking spaces according to their formula of making sure the business will be viable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't consider that angle.
Yeah, and developers themselves will be biased towards car-oriented development as well. You'll have exceptions. Like there's a development nearby called the Ivory that was just built with no parking. They actually, the only parking they have is for their car-shared vehicles, which are electric vehicles.
And what's happening in Mueller?
Way too much parking.
And your solution?
They shouldn't have built that much parking, so yeah.
But you want to talk about the golf carts?
That, yeah. So part of my platform for running is I want to adopt what other cities are doing around the U.S., which is encouraging people to buy neighborhood electric vehicles or golf carts to do those short trips, like 1 mile to, let's say, 8 or 9 miles. So people don't use their big conventional size car, whether it's EV or gas, they just leave that highway car at home and just use the little neighborhood electric vehicle. So that's what I'm advocating for. And I have one. I didn't drive it here because I use my e-bike most of the time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you, Katie. We appreciate that. Cool. Any other comments on Martin's presentation or questions?
Where did you get the data from?
Yeah, so the building permit data is from the city of Boston, so it's open data, and then the ECAT data, we don't know. I got it from David.
Okay.
But I don't know if we tried to like find where the source is. I don't know where it is, but it's basically like a building, and then it's just saying like, oh, this is the amount of energy it used, and then some of the other variables were just like kind of like Googling or like plot something for me.
So the IEA or EAI is the Energy Information Association. They have data sets from across the country on norms based on where you are. So we can use that as a proxy for what the consumption might be for a house or any other kind of property here in town. It's not as good as the information that Austin Energy has, but we don't have that information, so we're using this. And just to be clear for everybody, the idea here is to project load growth based on real actual things that are going to get built, or at least permitted to get built, or at least trying to get permitted to get built, as opposed to this kind of general conversation that's been happening, specifically in data centers, but probably in other areas, like, we think we might get X, which is just kind of a very vague, non-data driven statement. So I think this tool is super cool because it's absolutely data driven. People are trying to build this building, and we think it's going to use this much electricity, so we can see the electrical load growth from that.
What are there any things like for next, like, or what that you'd want to build onto it or next steps?
Yeah, I think like some of this like these like variables that I have, if you had like if say somebody else is doing this and like I disagree with this, I want to change it and I want to play around with it. I think that would be cool, just from like a analytics perspective. And then the other two were just like checking EV data as like a proxy into building load, and then also double checking if I miss any of the data centers.
So maybe we could just wrap up with this comment because you just said data centers. I think there's two ways to look at it. One is if it's not in the data, either maybe it's under the commercial or industrial use and not specifically a data center.
Yeah.
And maybe the way we could check that is just go back a few years and see, because we definitely have data centers within our territory. So they exist here at some point. So how did we categorize them when they were built? Just a thought. Okay, let's give Martin a hand. Yay!
Visit solaraustin.org to learn more.